right, Nida, welcome to the podcast. Super excited to chat with you today.
Hello, Alina. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So, for my first question always is give my audience a snapshot of your career story and who you are and kind of what you're up to these days.
Okay, so after I finished my bachelor and my master's degree in business and marketing, I came back to my home country and I worked with L'Oreal, the cosmetic company. I worked with Unilever, so all the top FMCG, fast-moving consumer good companies. I worked in the marketing department as a brand manager, product manager, managing the whole entire brand of the product. So cosmetics, skincare, and et cetera, et cetera. And a few years in, like I think it was 5 years, I decided that, corporate life was not for me. It was just not for me. I later on understood that it was my personality type. I was born to be an entrepreneur. Like I would say that because I feel it's really in my personality type. Both my parents were not entrepreneurs. My mom was a pediatrician. My dad was an architect, right? So I was always an entrepreneur since very young age. Like I would sell things, I would create things. I'm a creator, I'm a generator, And at the age of I think 26, I started a family. So I got married and I had a child, and I left the corporate world and I started a child development center. So that was like 15 years ago.
Oh, nice.
And that was the point where I got into psychology. Because running a child development center, I did a lot of consulting with parents on how to raise kids with a great mindset and be resilient and have high self-esteem and EQ and all that. And that transitioned into coaching adults and working with entrepreneurs, business owners, high performers, executives, and CEOs. And so currently what I do is, it's quite kind of a question that's hard for me to answer what I do because I talk about being multi-potential, being a multi-potentialite. So that's a term that means you're an expert in different areas that seem totally unrelated. And then you kind of integrate that into one thing. So it's very hard for people that are more multi-potential to stick to only one thing. And that's why my business kind of, when I explain it, it's not really in one niche. I do this and this and this and this, right? So I would say I'm a business coach. Like a lot of people know me as a business coach consultant, and I have 22 years in the business field on my own business, other businesses, consulting and working in the corporate world as well. But what I do in the real work that I do with clients is I work with them on their relationships, on their self-identity, on their mindset and all those things, and relationships with different people in their lives, like whether their spouse, their children, and all of that as well. So I work with them on their business and their love, life, everything. Yeah.
Well, I can see how it's all connected. So, and I love it that you pointed that out, because I think there's always been this debate, like, do you generalize or do you specialize? And so, and I love this term multi-potential, because it leaves room for that creativity. And I think, and I very much relate personally, because for the longest time, like I would always read these things and people like, you should focus, like, and I'm like, I can't, like, I'm not a person who likes one thing. Like, what should I do? And then I've realized, talking to people like yourself and others, like, no, this is okay. It's normal. And in fact, you're probably able to be like a full package to your clients, because it's not just one thing. You don't just do like business consulting, because business consulting, the root of it, right, is so much more. So it's very, very interesting. A funny thing is, literally, like last week, somebody called me a Swiss knife, the one that you open with different heads and different things you can do. And I was like, all right, I'm like a Swiss knife. So you're like a Swiss knife too. Basically useful in all situations. So I'm curious, having worked with different people, and when it comes to their businesses, what are some biggest misconceptions people have around starting a business, from if you've had those conversations?
Yeah, so I work with outliers, and sometimes these outliers happen to be in corporate life. Maybe they're a CEO, maybe they're in the C-suite. They have a really high position. They've worked for decades and decades in the corporate world and have been really successful. Now, when it's time for them to transition, like, hey, I'm retiring. I want to early retire. I want to start my own business with the expertise that I have. I know that I'm amazing at what I do, right? And then they want to leave and they want to start a consulting business, coaching business, whatever, agency, something that is based on their expertise, which they're really, really great at. Something that is a really common theme for these particular people that are leaving the corporate world is like, it's a totally different game. Because when you're working for corporate, like that's not your money that you're using, that you're spending, that you're, signing off, okay, this is the budget for this and that. Now it's really your money in your pocket. It's your hard-earned money that you've, collected throughout the years. It's your life savings, whatever, right? Now, spending your own money is a totally different game. It requires a totally different mindset. Now you're investing your own money, and that becomes really difficult for a lot of people that are starting out to be an entrepreneur. And they don't know, where should I start? How do I do personal branding for, even if I'm from marketing, like how do you do personal branding for your own, yourself? And then the other struggle is like, how do I sell myself? Like selling the brand or the products for the company, that was one thing. Now it's like selling me, putting myself out there. That's a risk. That's a very high risk, scary. It's all sorts of things, right? And selling me, like it starts to trigger, like, am I good enough? Who am I? Who am I to be doing this? I used to be the CEO, yes, but that was a CEO. This is a totally different thing.
Right.
I was hired to work for this company doing this and that, but now selling me. And then, it triggers all sorts of self-identity and mindset and self-belief, limiting beliefs, and all those things.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I love that you pointed out that, just because you're really good at something and you've done it for when you had a whole team of people behind you, right? Like you had a whole company of employees, it doesn't necessarily prepare you for the roller coaster of entrepreneurship. And it's interesting that you mentioned the mindset. And I wonder, in your experience, having worked with children, who, as you know, children are very like confident and they say what's on and they think they're the best thing ever. And at some point, something happens to us in our adulthood or maybe even teenage years that all of a sudden we are like, nope, I don't want to talk about myself. Like, what do you think about that? What happens, I guess, in your experience?
Yeah, well, a lot of how we are in this world, like who we show up to be, our self-identity is what I refer it to. So self-identity is like self-concept, self-perception. It's basically, how do you perceive yourself? And a lot of it is unconscious, right? A lot of it is unconscious, and other people might see it or they might not, right? So even if you're confident in what you do, you might still have low self-esteem. And part of that self-identity could be like, I'm not good enough. Yeah, I'm good at being a CEO, but I'm not good enough. I can't make a lot of money in my business or whatever, right? So all these things are shaped through how you were parented, the culture, the family that you grew up in. Like, so that's why they say the first 7 years of your life really shapes you, really shapes who you become and how, the adult you become. So there's nurture plus nature. There's this like personality types. There's your characteristics that you were born with. But then a lot of the environment, the nurture part, really shapes you. And so past experience, maybe you failed an exam in your third grade, that really stays with you. That's an emotional event. So that's why when I coach people and, they say, well, I'm not capable, or I'm not good enough, or not confident in this or that, I really dig into find out where that came from. You weren't born with this. So where did you get this belief? This is a belief that, like, for example, this one person had a belief that, if I'm number one or if I'm amazing at this, like people will hurt me, right? Like, okay, that doesn't make sense. Like, where did you get that? And they don't even know where they got it. And then we start to look at what happened in the past, and then they think about it. And then they, oh, I didn't realize that this was the event that caused this, because we don't think about these things, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so it's all the past events, the past results, and then we make a meaning about these things. And then there are beliefs that were transferred to us from our parents and our family and our culture and the society as well. So even watching a movie or you're watching television, you acquire beliefs from things that you watch on television, whether it's, the world is a very dangerous place, or rich people are horrible people. You see these from movies, right? And you subconsciously, your subconscious brain is like a sponge. It picks up, collects all these things, whether they are true or not, right? Yeah, and you assimilate all of it, and that's what some of it you interject into yourself, and you start to believe it, and then you start to find evidence to confirm that it's true. So if you believe I'm not good enough, you start to look for evidence that how you're not good enough. You don't look for evidence of how you're good enough, right? You look for something that confirms what you believe, and that's just human nature. We're programmed to be doing that, and until you have the awareness of that was like what was happening, what you're doing to yourself, you continue to self-sabotage. So yeah.
It's like your own worst enemy. Your own worst critic.
Yeah.
So how can, especially in the world of entrepreneurship, right? Like, because what you're talking about a lot is that mental toughness, is that mental awareness about self, and then also how do you work through those things. So, and being an entrepreneurship, you know very well, it's a continuous, like a mental challenge on like daily basis. What do you like? How can people work on that? Like, what do you recommend?
Well, it's almost like going to the fitness, right? The more you tackle problems, the more you go through them, you confront them instead of hiding from them or avoiding them, which a lot of people do, because we're programmed to feel good. We don't like conflict. We don't want to confront it. So we kind of try to escape it or try to dodge the bullets. So, like, oh, this issue is happening here. Please look at me. I'm an issue. You need to solve me. Like, the problem is here in the business. And you're like, you go and focus on other stuff that's more comfortable. Right? You don't want to eat the frog. You don't want to deal with that thing that's the most difficult, most uncomfortable. But that's the thing that you need to deal with first, right? And so we dodge it, we escape, we try to ignore it, and then it comes up and up and up and up again. So really, how to train yourself is to tackle those things. The thing that you need to tackle, the most important thing, which is the most uncomfortable thing for you most of the time. So it's like going to fitness, and the personal trainer is like getting you to do the thing that you hate, you don't want to do. You want to do the comfortable thing, right? So when you do that thing, you confront it, you discover that it's not that scary. It was all in your head, like, and because our survival brain, the reptilian brain, is telling you to avoid the fear, avoid the things that are scary and uncomfortable, right? So you automatically just avoid it. But we have this logical brain that actually we're aware that we actually go and tackle them. So when you tackle it, you discover, oh, it's not that scary, and I handled it pretty good. So it's fine. And then, so when you actually handled it fine and you did well, the dopamine comes out, right? And now you're rewiring your brain to be addicted to a new behavior, which is confronting the problem.
Yeah,
so it feels
so
uncomfortable, but you use your logic brain to override your reptilian or your survival brain. Because we're not animals, but we're humans. We actually have a logical brain. So, but you have to have the awareness that this is how it's done. Otherwise, you just go into autopilot mode and you use your survival brain. You avoid you avoid the thing that you need to tackle. And so when you start to do it more, you get addicted that, oh, I'm a really good problem solver, or I can do this hard thing, and you feel good about yourself. And that transforms your self-identity as well. Then you discover, oh, I'm actually a good entrepreneur. Oh, like that employee that wanted to talk to me and have that hard conversation I used to avoid. Now, like, I'm really good at people skills. Like, I'm really an empathetic boss. Like, I really understand people. And that employee really had a good insight after talking with me. And that like really conditions us to do those behaviors that you feel uncomfortable in the past. And that's how it's like going to fitness. It's like you're developing yourself. Your mental fitness or mental toughness is about tackling the challenges, sticking to your word, doing what you said you were going to do, getting out of your comfort zone, having control over your results in life. When you tackle the issues, that's part of it, of having mental toughness. But this is like literally how you train yourself, how you train your body, how you train your brain.
Yeah, it's like developing that muscle essentially. And what's interesting is that that self-awareness piece, which is so difficult for a lot of us, for many of us. And sometimes people are self-aware, but then they don't have the growth mindset, right? Like the willingness to change and learn. So have you noticed with entrepreneurs, do you see like, especially with the those that are like kind of CEOs, because I can see how that might be even more difficult for them because it's much harder after you've developed certain set of habits and been doing them for a long time. Do you see any difference between generations, or is it really just comes down to like, hey, like if you really want to do this, you need to be willing to take a chance? Or do you see it's more challenging with more senior clients to help them make that change?
Definitely see that there is a difference in the generation, right? So if we look at least my parents were the baby boomers.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to look like we go back to that condition and culture that they were born into. So a lot of people in their 20s or 30s, they fight with their parents. They're like, why don't they have my mindset? Why don't I have a mindset like me? Like you can be anything, you can do anything, whatever, right? They have an abundance kind of mindset because they grew up in a world where, oh, you can be a YouTuber with millions of followers, easy, or something like that, right? And then there's a downside to the new generation as well. But my focus here is I want to talk about the baby boomers or the older generations, right? So the baby boomers, they were born in what, post-war generation. They were just struggling to live and survive and find food and make like provide for the family. It's a very different condition, right? And that condition really sets your mind. It affects your mindset. It's like your beliefs come from your parents, nature, everything. It comes from the environment that you were born in. So you look around, you pick up all these things, and that sets your mindset, and that gives you the beliefs, positive or negative, right? And so yes, I do see that in clients that want to start their businesses that are in the 50s and 60s. They're kind of like the Gen X and the baby boomers. So the Gen X are normally the kids of the baby boomers. So, and they still have that sense of security. They need to be sure before I do it, and that was like corporate life. So definitely the longer they stayed in corporate life, 30, 40 years, it's really a safe place. Corporate life is like you can do, mostly you will still get to be a CEO. If you get fired, you still get to be hired by another company. So it's relatively safe, but much safer. Like not really safe because you can lose your job, right? But in your mind, you think it's safe, right? In your perception, you think it's safe.
Yeah.
You go to work, you get a salary, you get a bonus, whatever. But entrepreneurship, nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah.
No amount of money is guaranteed, right?
Yeah.
Nothing is guaranteed. So they come from the mindset like, I need to be certain that this idea is going to be good, that I'm going to be able to make this amount of money before I leave the corporate world. I need to be super confident. I need to be sure. And that doesn't exist. It's not the reality. You never are sure that you never know whether you're going to fail or not. And that requires you to be a risk taker. And so I think that definitely the pattern I see in those generations, like you're less of a risk taker for sure. Not everybody, because there's like many factors, right? And in the newer generation, they are more of a risk taker. And it's because of the condition they were born in, of the world of abundance, and everything is easy and convenient. There's just so many channels like social media that you can sell stuff and do so many things, right? And if you fail, doesn't matter. Next day you start another thing. And many things is normal for them. I see people these days, like the influencers and freelancers, like they have like 7 things, like they do 7 occupations, like I'm an expert in this and that, I do this and that. So I think it's kind of like normal. They don't come from a mindset of like, I have to have only one job and do it for the rest of my life. They don't have that mindset in which the older generations have. And so that's, I definitely see that difference.
Yeah. I mean, the risk is definitely, you have to be very resilient, because it's and risk, again, like when I think of risk, I think like fear, right? And then it goes back to that reptilian brain. So it's like all connected for sure. So you talk about the point of divergence. So talk to me a little bit about what is the point of divergence in business, and
Mhm.
how do people find it? How do you find it?
Yeah. So the point of divergence, so if we look at the definition of divergence, it's the point where two things split off from each other.
Mm,
You're diverting, you're deviating. It's definitely what I work with outliers. So it's the path of the outlier. It's like, well, 100 people are going that way. I'm going to think of another way. I'm going to go the other way. Well, the opposite is convergence, right? So the opposite of divergence is convergence, and it's the act of converging or coming together, unity, union, moving toward union and uniformity. So I focus my work at least on the business coaching side. I work with outliers, which are people that really want to be exceptional at what they do. Like they are exceptional at what they do, but how do they show up in the world and let other people also know that they're exceptional at what they do?
mm,
So the point of divergence is like, what sets you apart from the other people?
mm,
What sets you apart from the mainstream of the 99 point whatever of the other people that are in your niche doing what you're doing?
mm,
And how we do that is through creating the world's best solution. By
mhm,
creating the best solution, the world's best solution, you find your point of divergence. You find out how you're different, how you're irreplaceable.
mm. Solution for
There's
like for your clients, you mean for whatever they're looking. Yeah.
yeah. And that takes a look. We look at a couple of things when we're working when I'm working with clients. We go deep. We go deep
Mm,
into finding like what's your genius, like what's your genius. How are you different? Like if a client were to work with you and get these amazing results, what did you do differently? Sometimes my clients don't know. They're not aware.
mm,
Conscious competency. They're competent at something, but they don't even know what it is. It's like when you've learned to drive and you don't even know how to drive. Like, how could you explain how to drive to someone, right?
mm,
So it's about bringing that to the conscious level of, oh, this is the 3 special ingredients that the other pizza shops don't have.
mm,
And you weren't even aware of that. You thought every other pizza shop had the same thing or
mm,
similar. So we dig in through this complex research and insight process to find out what their genius is, and on the customer or their client's side, what are their problems, and how do you make your client's life easier and
mm,
better, even for a problem that your clients don't even realize yet that they're struggling with this thing. So we go into digging into the mind and understanding their struggles and pain points and all that. And then so
mm,
2 things: your genius and your clients struggles and problems that they want to solve.
mm,
And then we find the overlapping of these 2 things. How
mm,
do you deliver your geniuses to solve a problem in a unique way
mm,
that nobody else is solving, or they aren't solving it exceptionally?
mm.
So that's how we create the world's best solution, and that's how you become aware of how you divert from the rest of the mainstream or the rest of the 99.99%.
I think the difficult part there for many people, myself included, for the longest time, for me, it was around some things I do is so common sense to me and they come so naturally that I forget that actually it's a skill. Not everybody has it. Like in my, like I'm really, I can be really extrovert. I can really connect with people and build relationships and stuff like that. And to me, it just comes so naturally because I'm just curious and I always want to talk to everybody. But for other people, it's like the worst fear is to have to talk to somebody. When I look at people that are like really analytical or like engineers, and I'm like, wow, like I'm so impressed, and they're impressed with me, and I'm like, how is that? Like you're so much smarter, because in my head I'm like, this is like common sense. So I find that's probably difficult for many people.
Yeah, that's true, because and the people that actually a research in psychology that explains this, like the people that have the highest skill or expertise in a specific subject or area,
Mm-hmm.
like say for example a smart person in general doesn't really think they're that smart. You know what I mean? Because they're
Mm-hmm.
comparing
Mm-hmm.
themselves to a higher standard. Oh, smart
Yeah.
actually, like Albert Einstein or Elon Musk,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So even if you're a genius, you would like look at the next level of smartness and you say, well, I'm just average. Yeah, I know
Mm.
I'm smarter than most people, like a lot of people, but I'm not really that smart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You also come from a beginner's learner's mindset, like beginning like learner mindset, where you're like, oh, I have so much more to learn.
Mm.
And so the point about like the unconscious competency, yeah, you've been doing this for decades and decades. Sometimes you've been doing this without even knowing that you're doing it. Like for
Mm.
me, I discovered my love for psychology, and I'm so good at analyzing people and understanding them at like what caused this and that. Like I didn't know that until I got into like 26 and I started the
Mm.
Child Development Center. But as I look back, I start to think, oh, when I was in my teenage years, like friends would call me to consult me on their life problems and things like that. That was
Yeah.
like, that was why
Yeah.
I wasn't even aware. I thought like this happened to everyone, like friends were calling everybody to consult. And then I discovered, no, they were actually just calling me. And I've always like loved to watch CSI investigative kind of movies. So that was
Mm.
like the analytical brain and the psychology brain,
Yeah.
understand why this person did this and that. And I watch like serial killer kind of like documentaries and stuff like that. So I've always been doing that throughout my whole life since a very young age without
Mm.
knowing it. That's why when
Wow.
I got to the point that I was aware that I'm good at this, it
Hmm.
just seemed like I was like doing it all my whole life. That's why I got really good at what I was doing so fast. It wasn't because I just started that at that age of 26, but I've always been doing it, just not consciously. I didn't know I was
Mm.
doing it. So I think this is what a lot of people have been doing. They were just not aware that they were
Mm.
doing it. A lot of skills that we've practiced and done, we didn't know. We just did
Mm.
it automatically because it's mostly our strengths. It's our strengths.
Mm.
I, I've just always been doing this because like automatically, because it's your strength and you
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah, you don't even realize it. You're absolutely
Yeah,
right. Which is,
exactly.
yeah, which is why like they tell you like, if they try to, when you're kind of looking for a change in your career, usually people will be like, well, what did you enjoy doing when you were younger? Because those
Yeah,
things when we could just do anything, right? Like life was pretty, carefree for many people, right? That teenage years, and then you're just like, and you did just whatever felt good. And but you didn't really know it yet. So it's interesting, yeah. So it's like almost like looking at what comes naturally,
yeah,
and learning to recognize that doesn't come naturally to everybody.
exactly, exactly.
Mm. So I do have one more question for you, but before that, tell me, where do you hang out? Where can people get in touch with you? Where can they talk to you? Or if people listening are like, this resonates, I need a conversation, I need a business coach, where can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can, well, I have like in touch, you mean like to actually chat with me?
Yeah, yeah,
That
to connect
the
with you.
best, yeah, the best place would be, I guess they can connect with me on LinkedIn and
Hmm.
Instagram. But if they want to send me a message, it has to be on my email.
Okay.
So at nidaleard.com. Yeah, that would be where I will receive the email for sure. Because sometimes I don't check all the social media messages.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll make sure to share all of that in the chat, in the episode notes as well for those that are listening. And I'll put all your links there. So, last question that I usually ask my guests is, what is one question do you wish people would ask themselves more often?
Um, I think it should be the question, how do I make this world a better place? Or how do I become a better person? Which is
Mm.
kind of thing, right? Yeah. I think if everybody, I always look at things from a high level of like, okay, it's not about just changing one person. It's about like, how do we change the whole world? So I'm a very big
Mm.
picture kind of thinker. So I'm like, okay, and I like to contemplate about like the type of questions that you like to ask. It's about like, if this was possible, like how would I do this? And it's about having the mind of curiosity, like being a curious person, right?
Mm.
I think if everybody thought that thought or had that question, they asked that question to themselves often, the world would be a much better place,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah.
And think about it. If everybody tomorrow just woke up and asked themselves this question, like, how do I
Mm.
become a better person? How do I go to work, become a better boss? How do I become a better parent today? What are
Mm.
3 things that I can do to make A, B, and C better today. On a global level, that would create so many changes, like a domino effect, right?
Yeah. No, it's a powerful question. It's a simple yet deep question because it forces you to think, right? And it forces you into like action, and it's hard to, and that's why I love this, to ask my guests this question, because I think we get so caught up in our day-to-day that we just don't even talk to ourselves as much as we should, right? Like, what is that? What should we be asking ourselves? Like, that's you know, and that's a great one. You know, how can I be better? Like, what can you do to be better in X, Y, and Z? Yeah, absolutely right. It's a beautiful question, Nida. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks for making the time. I'd love to chat with you again sometime for sure, as you're kind of, you know, working with these individuals and continuing to kind of collect stories and just sharing these really insightful information with us. I'd love to have a chat again. Thank you again for making the time.
You're welcome.